So, so thanks so much for joining us. My name is Cyan, and I'm the coordinator at Toronto Environmental Alliance for the Zero Waste High Rise project. So this project, over the last 2.5 years, we've worked with 15 buildings all across Toronto in reducing waste. So we've identified and studied the practices of model zero waste buildings. So those are buildings that are really exemplary in what they've done and produce very little waste. They're indicated on this map by the yellow icons. And then we've supported other buildings in replicating the best practices of the model buildings. So the red icons represent buildings we worked with in our first year, and the blue icons are buildings in our second year. So collectively, these 15 buildings have achieved really incredible waste reduction results, and it's led to cleaner communities as well as cost savings for those buildings. So for this final stage of this project that we've launched just a few months ago, our goal is to enable anyone in the city to follow a step-by-step online program that guides you in learning from these leading buildings and taking action in your buildings. So my goal today is to give you an overview of how buildings achieve waste reduction, and also how you can participate in the project to reduce waste in your building. So first, we're going to look at the opportunity that exists for waste reduction in high-rise. Then I'm going to review how you can take steps by joining the project and following our step-by-step online pathway. And lastly, I'll share some success stories that buildings have achieved by following these steps. And at the end, we'll have a bit of time to go over any questions you might have. So before diving in, just some quick background on Toronto Environmental Alliance, if you haven't heard of us before. So Toronto Environmental Alliance, we're known as T for short. We're a local environmental nonprofit working for a greener city for everyone in Toronto since 1988. And how we do this work is we work on a range of issues, waste reduction, air quality, climate change, and we advocate for policies for those issues, both from City Hall, but also from businesses. And one of our main ways for inspiring these new policies and getting them implemented is by first showing what's possible through community projects. So this project, the Zero Waste High Rise project, for example, through this project, we're showing how much potential there is for waste reduction in buildings and what kind of supports that other community stakeholders can provide. And the project is funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, which is an agency of the Government of Ontario. We're also grateful for our partnership with researchers at the University of Toronto. So U of T researchers, they actually help us document and evaluate the successes of the buildings that we work with. And we have funding from Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada for this research aspect of our work. And to be clear, just on terminology, we use the term high-rise in our project name. It's a bit of a misnomer because, you don't need to be a skyscraper to be involved in this project. Any multi-residential building in Toronto can participate. So multi-residential building is a building with 9 or more units. So there could be a small building with 4 or 5 stories. And this includes condos, co-ops, apartments, social housing. Any of these types of buildings can apply and be a part of this program. So let's start by looking at the opportunity for multi-res buildings to go zero waste. And by zero waste, what I mean is it's an approach to waste reduction that focuses on eliminating garbage that's sent to landfill or incinerator. So it's really focused on conserving resources by reducing, reusing, recycling as much as possible. And therefore, a zero waste building is a building that commits to continual ongoing efforts to find, new ways that the building can reduce waste further. All this said, the reality is that multi-res buildings tend to have a bad reputation compared to single-family homes when it comes to being efficient with waste. So this is just some stats that kind of highlights that. One of the ways that waste performance is measured is through a metric called diversion rate. So in Toronto, single-family homes have a diversion rate of 64%. This means that 64% of the total waste from these homes is being recycled or composted, which is pretty good. So 64% of household waste is being diverted away from going to the landfill or incinerators. High-rise buildings, on the other hand, have a diversion rate of just 28%. So that's especially troubling in a city like Toronto, where about half our population currently lives in multi-res buildings, and that trend is only increasing. So those stats are from the City of Toronto, and to supplement that data, T has conducted our own waste audits in several buildings as part of our project. So this literally involved digging through garbage, recycling, and organics bins and collecting samples and then sorting those samples to figure out what's actually in these bins. And so this is a photo of some of our U of T research assistants that helped us do this field work and analyze the results. And the low diversion rate for multi-res buildings that the city reported is really reflected in what we found inside garbage bins. So this graphic shows what we found inside the garbage bin of a building that actually has recycling and organics collection. Still, roughly 50% of what was in that building's garbage was actually organics. And roughly 20% of what was in that building's garbage bin is recycling. So we found that across our audits in the buildings that we work with, that on average, only 20 to 30% of what's in a building's garbage bin is actually garbage. So why is this happening? Why is all this stuff going in the garbage? Well, what we're finding is that compared to single-family homes, multi-res buildings face barriers to diverting waste that single-family homes don't have. So a huge barrier is access to recycling and organics. So in Toronto, every single family home has access to organics collection by the city. However, multi-res buildings, they have private waste service. And many of these buildings with private service, including the one I live in, don't receive organics collection. So residents like me, even though I'm an environmentalist, I don't have access to diverting organics. And that's about 50% of my household waste. Another aspect of access is having enough room. So enough like space in your bins for recycling. So single family homes, for example, they can upsize their recycling bin if they find that they're producing more recycling. So they could find a size that fits their needs. But many buildings I've worked with, they don't actually have enough blue bins. And it's harder for individual homes to have control over that. So bins get routinely full. And so this is another way how residents might have limited access to proper collection because there's just no more space in the blue bins in their building. And then another barrier is convenience. So many buildings, for example, have just a single chute on each floor, only for garbage. And this means that residents can dispose garbage with just a few steps out their door. But on the other hand, they have to carry their recycling organics down the elevator, down to a room on the ground floor, or sometimes all the way across the parking lot to reach some bins outside. So especially in the winter here in Toronto, this can be very, very hard to get to. So even if recycling and organics collection is available, if the option isn't convenient, then it may not be used. And so, these are barriers, and though these barriers of access and convenience to proper waste sorting is a challenge, there's a growing number of buildings that are overcoming these challenges through creative solutions and are achieving incredible waste reduction results. So I want to just spotlight one of these buildings. You may have heard of them. It's a building in Scarborough, a condo called Mayfair on the Green. And Mayfair has completely changed our idea of what's possible in high-rise buildings when it comes to managing solid waste. So Mayfair is a building with about 282 units and 700 residents. And like many buildings in Toronto, as I mentioned, they only have a single chute on each floor just for garbage disposal. Obviously, a lot of recycling organics goes down that chute into the garbage. But if you were to sort it out properly, residents would have to take recycling organics down to a room on the ground floor. But a few years ago, when the superintendent, Princely, who's in this photo, learned that organics going to landfill contributes to climate change, and that most waste from households is actually organic waste, he was inspired to figure out how can we make organics collection the easiest option for residents. If that's most of the waste in a household and it's contributing to climate change, if it's going to landfill, let's make sure it's not going to landfill. And he was really motivated to figure that out. So he convened a community town hall and proposed that the single chute in their building be used exclusively for organics collection. And under this proposal, garbage would instead be taken to the ground floor waste room. So this would involve no costly changes to the building. It's just a simple switch of how the existing infrastructure, the existing chute is used so that green behavior is the option that it facilitates. And residents really like this idea of not having to carry their bags of organics down the elevator because organics bags are heavy, they're smelly, they're wet. So they understood that if they sorted their waste correctly, they would actually have fewer trips to the waste room overall because there's very little garbage left over. So the community actually agreed to the proposal, and Princely and his staff, they took time to go door to door to make sure everyone had the tools and education to take part in organics composting fully. So this is a photo of the superintendent, Princely, beside their chute, which is now connected to a green bin. And residents now easily dispose of organics on their own floor, and what little garbage is left is taken down to the waste room on the ground floor. And so this new convenience and behavior has led to less trips out the door to dispose of waste overall. And by making this switch, Mayfair on the Green has reduced their garbage from 20 garbage bins per month to just 1 bin per month. Also, Mayfair receives city waste service, and the city only charges for garbage collection. Recycling and organics collection is free. So now that Mayfair is really fully utilizing organics collection, they were able to reduce the costs of garbage in their building from $20,000 to just $5,000. So Mayfair's secret in achieving this is really just taking incremental steps year after year to find ways to constantly increase access, increase convenience to zero waste options in their building. So beyond that chute conversion, they've also added new waste collection services like used cooking oil, reusable clothing, and they try to make these services as convenient as possible. So if you haven't seen T's video about Mayfair, I recommend checking it out. We've just put a link in the chat. And we did a waste audit at Mayfair as well as the other model buildings like them. And we found that these leading model buildings, they've achieved waste diversion results of 85%, above 80%. And so this significantly outperforms single family homes. And we believe that all multi-res buildings can reach this potential. Because as much as multi-res buildings have those unique barriers, they also have unique assets that single-family homes don't have. So some of those unique strengths are shared space, for example. So common spaces can facilitate communal collection of certain waste materials, like e-waste and hazardous waste. They also have the expertise of staff that can be leveraged to implement new solutions. And multi-res communities, being a vertical community, it also allows people to very easily convene and organize together. So different buildings will have a different mix of these strengths. And our goal in this project is to show you how different buildings have utilized those strengths to reduce waste and help you reflect on what are your unique strengths and how you could utilize them to reduce waste in your building. So now, without further ado, let's look at the online pathway and how this project works. A few notes just on what participation entails. So first, there's no cost to participate. The project is fully funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. And second, anyone can participate and take steps. So you can be a resident, you can be a board member, you could be a staff at the building. We've seen, people from any type of role be the catalyst for change in buildings. And then the program is self-guided, so you can move through the online pathway that I'm going to review at your own pace. But if you get stuck, you can always reach out to me directly for guidance. And lastly, T is going to be recognizing and celebrating buildings that have made a change by February 28th. So to help you do this, we are offering a limited number of microgrants of up to $500 for buildings that complete key steps on this pathway by January 31st. And I'll explain how that works in a bit more detail shortly. So this is the online pathway. It's a series of online forms, tools, templates organized into 4 stages. And the goal is to help you learn from and replicate the approaches of leading buildings. There's no one size fits all solution, but there's 15 buildings that we've worked with and we've documented what they've done. And so our goal is to create inspiration for you, and you get to pick and choose what you want to take away and how you make it your own. Completing the online forms at each stage is a key component of how this works. So they're designed to help you understand and learn how your building is currently doing and identify what priority areas that you want to focus on and keep track of progress. And as you move through the stages and complete the forms, you'll receive update emails that share new resources from T. You'll also be invited to online peer learning events where you get connected with residents and staff from other buildings in this community and get ideas from them. So ultimately, based on what you learn about your building and its opportunity through these forums and through these resources, our goal is that you're able to implement waste reduction initiatives in your building. So the first stage is a simple introduction form. Submitting this form is the first step in you formally getting started in the project. And in this form, we want to learn more about you, your building, and your interest in getting involved. I know you may have already done this, but if you haven't, we've put a link in the chat, and that's the first step to getting involved. And stage 2 is about identifying your building specific opportunities. So there are 2 key forms in this stage. The first is a waste collection assessment. So this will guide you in identifying gaps in access and convenience to waste collection in your building. This will involve doing a walkthrough of your building and noting what waste is collected where. So for example, in doing that walkthrough, you may find that areas of your building only have a garbage bin and can use recycling bins and organics bins next to it, so that those options are equally convenient. Or you may notice that certain bins can use additional or improved signs and stickers to make it clear what belongs in them. You'll also be prompted to consider what additional waste streams your building can collect separately from garbage, such as e-waste and hazardous waste. The other key form in stage 2 is the community strengths form. So this will guide you in identifying, the other groups and people in your building that you may want to work with, and the communication methods you can use to engage this larger resident base. So when you submit either of these forms, you will get a copy emailed to you to help you share the findings with others in your building and for you to easily reference back to during the next stages. Stage 3, based on the gaps and opportunities you identified in stage 2, you will develop a custom action plan that is focused on a key improvement that you want to make before the end of February. So for example, this could be a plan that is focused on adding recycling bins where they're missing to make recycling more convenient in your building. We've created an action plan that you'll find in this stage that will guide you, a form that's going to guide you in honing in on the problem and solution you want to focus on and map out the specific action steps, timeline, how you're going to track your progress in this form. And we also have lots of sample action plans you can reference to get ideas and inspiration. So throughout January and February, you'll have opportunities to book time with me or attend Q&A sessions to discuss your action plan and get feedback as well. And this is a really great time to get started because, as I mentioned, we just announced a limited number of micro grants to help you take action. So to apply for this micro grant, you will need to complete all the forms in stage 1, 2, and 3. So that's the introduction form, stage 1, the waste collection assessment and community strengths form in stage 2, and then the action plan in stage 3. And the micro grant is up to $500 to cover hard costs involved in your plan to improve waste diversion. So for example, you may want to introduce some new bins or shelving or custom signs. These are all expenses that would be eligible for the micro grant. However, consumable supplies, such as bags or gloves or staff costs or event costs would not be eligible. We'll be releasing the application form in the next few weeks. But in the meantime, how you want to get started is completing the stage 1, 2, 3 forms. And as you do this, you'll start developing an idea for an action. I recommend contacting me if you're interested in the microgrant, so that you have a chance to workshop your idea with me, and I'm happy to offer that support. So after receiving approval for your action plan and microgrant application, to receive the funds, you will have to submit a progress report that shows completion of your action plan by February 28th. And this progress report is a part of stage 4, and it's going to help you measure and track progress. We encourage you to submit these reports on an ongoing basis as a way of documenting your efforts so that you can celebrate achievements over time with your community. And to that end, we'll be hosting a recognition event in the spring where we will celebrate the achievements of all the buildings that took action in the project in early 2021. So you can access the full online pathway by going to torontoenvironment.org/highrise_project_join, and then clicking on the first banner that you'll see that says online pathway. So now to conclude, I wanted to share some stories from the buildings we've already worked with to give you an idea of how working through these stages leads to change. One of my favorites is a recent success from a building named Windmill Line, because it's an example of resident-led waste reduction that happened during COVID-19. So Windmill Line is in the Esplanade neighborhood of Toronto. It's a building with 10 stories, 206 units, and they joined the project in fall 2019. Camille, who's a resident at Windmill Line, she started a zero waste team to try to organize with residents to come up with ideas on what they could do. And part of what they did is they attended peer learning events hosted by T. So those are the events that I referenced earlier that we host virtually, where you get to meet and connect with other leaders across the city. And then she also did a walkthrough of her building to assess, what are her gaps, what are her opportunities. So this is a photo of her doing that walkthrough. And, in combination of doing that walkthrough, noting down what happens in her building, while also learning from other buildings, Camille noticed that one of her gaps is that they don't have used cooking oil collection, which is something that she saw in another building, which is actually Mayfair, which I just talked about earlier. So she learned that Princely, the superintendent at Mayfair, the reason why he started collecting used cooking oil is because cooking oil is one of the biggest contributors to drains being clogged in buildings. And not only do clogged drains lead to thousands of dollars of plumbing fees each year for buildings, these clogged drains can lead to foul odors and flooding in units, which leads to expensive cleanups and repairs. So when COVID-19 lockdowns happened, Camille reviewed her notes and realized that, hey, this would be a perfect time to introduce cooking oil collection because so many more residents are cooking at home. So she got on the phone with Princely to understand his building's process and researched companies that would offer drum and collection to her buildings. Then she pitched the idea to her building manager, who loved the idea and approved it without delay. So her team of resident volunteers then organized a communication plan to launch this new service with clear instructions on how residents can bring down their oil. They officially launched the service in July, and here's a picture of their first happy customer bringing down used cooking oil to the waste room in a mason jar. So I think this is a wonderful example of not just providing access to a new zero waste service, but it also is a very thoughtful and prepared example of how to communicate a new service to residents in a way that fosters pride and fosters community values around waste reduction. And another really inspiring thing about it is that all this was done during the first stage 1 and 2 lockdown of COVID-19 last spring and early summer. Another success is our building in Mimico. It has 14 stories, about I think 153 units. And what they did is they convened residents and staff together to talk about waste challenges. And as part of this project, they identified that, the issue of insufficient space for recycling came up. So the building collected recycling and these recycling toters before. They had 14 toters located in a shed. And the toters were always full. It led to a lot of overflowing onto the floor, which created a constant mess for staff to clean up. It also meant that, many residents got into the habit of throwing recycling in the garbage. So by using TEA's assessment tools, the building was able to track what was going in the garbage over time and confirm that a significant amount of material in the garbage was actually recycling. As a result, the property manager made the decision to replace the toters with big blue bins so that the amount of space for recycling would be increased. So they closed the shed, they added 2 large bins outdoors, as well as 2 more blue bins in the garage. And in total, this doubled the total capacity of recycling collection available to residents. And so because of this measure, recycling went way up and garbage went down by about 30%. And it led to about a 30% reduction in their garbage costs. So these are just some of the templates for action you will learn about in the coming weeks by participating in the project. We're really looking forward to working with you and figuring out what you want to do and supporting you in implementing that.